Welcome everybody to Science, Technology in the Future. Today we have John Horgan here. He's a science journalist, is best known, I guess, for his book, The End of Science. Many of you may have heard of it. And he's written a number of other books. More recently, Pay Attention, Sex, Death and Science, which I found a joy to read, and we'll talk a bit about that later. He's also a prolific writer and blogger, self-described science blogger for many publications, including National Geographic, Scientific American, the New York Times, Time, Newsweek, and IEEE Spectrum. So today we'll be discussing all sorts of things, but science and science journalism, as well as his new books, and also maybe even a bit about AI. So thanks for joining us on the show, John. It's really a pleasure to have you here.
Hey, it's a pleasure for me to be here, especially since we're on opposite sides of the globe here.
We're in the antipodes down here. We cling onto the soil with our feet to stop us falling into the sky. So as a self-described jaded but rational and hard-nosed critic, who holds science to very high standards. As a science communicator, I'm just wondering about your impressions of science communication and the information deficit that is the explanation of why people are sometimes hostile or dismissive towards science. Just, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question. I started out, I think most science journalists are right in what I would call a celebratory mode, which means that they see their job as finding out the amazing things that scientists are discovering and inventing, and then going to the public and telling them about these amazing things. I became a science writer in the early 80s because I wanted to do that. I've always thought that science is the most extraordinary part of human culture. It's the only really definitely progressive part of human culture. And I didn't want to be a scientist myself. I've always wanted to be a writer. And so I thought that being a science writer would be a great career. Once I became a science writer, I started out at an engineering magazine, IEEE Spectrum, and then in the mid-'80s went over to Scientific American. I began to see this gap between the picture of science being presented both by scientists and by science writers and the reality of it as I was learning it, my own research. And increasingly through the late 80s and early 90s, I began to write in this more critical style of science journalism, still trying to recognize its extraordinary accomplishments, but pointed out areas where I thought there was a lot of bullshit. And there's just an extraordinary amount of bullshit to write about in science. And, I'm sometimes accused of being too critical, of being anti-science, because I do so much debunking of big fields of science and of respected scientific figures. But I see my function as absolutely the kind of thing that science should be doing on its own. Science should be this really skeptical, self-critical enterprise. I think that one of the problems that you have today is that some people are so skeptical of science that they just dismiss it out of hand. They have no respect for scientific authorities at all. So there's this kind of, and I worry about that tendency in myself. Sometimes I can become too antagonistic towards some scientists, especially if I think they're too full of themselves. My personal feelings get in the way sometimes. But what I'm trying to do is again, sort of acknowledge that science is this unbelievably powerful way for us to know the world and manipulate the world. But it's also this very powerful institution within modern culture that has a marketing arm that is trying to get money and trying to get glory and fame, and that says a lot of things that aren't so.
Look, I totally agree with you there. It's like we've got the actual practice of the science in its, you could, I won't say pure, but like the way that humans practice it, but this more serious aspect. We've got this incredibly sober-minded, ultra-conservative, not in a political sense, but ultra-conservative sort of way of looking at the world, this structured approach. And then you've got this, hey, I need to pay the bills, and we need to communicate the science. You've got the journalistic side, which, you know, tries to bridge the public understanding from what the scientific enterprise are doing. And science needs to be funded as well. And if people aren't sort of interested in science, they don't know the connect between science and the things that they enjoy in the real world, then maybe they won't vote for the politicians who want to do anything with science, or, you know, maybe they'll vote for the science deniers or whatnot. So there's a, you know, you have to sort of engage with people, but there's an attention economy, right? In order to get people's attention, you need to sort of glitter things up a little bit and sort of in some ways exaggerate and like capture people's attention and hopefully drip feed them. I said we need to do that, or I'll rephrase that. There's a big temptation to do that.
Yeah.
And I think that they can sometimes be dangerous. Yeah.
There are some parts of science where the tendency to hype and exaggerate doesn't matter that much. Like if you're talking about string theory or cold dark matter and cosmological models of the universe, those sorts of things, who cares if they exaggerate? Who cares really about multiverse theory? I mean, actually, I care, but that I think some of these really over the top speculative models in physics are bad for physics and they're bad for science, but they're not as bad as fields like human genetics or theories and therapies for mental illness, where there are tremendous financial stakes. You know, like a new antidepressant can make a company, a pharmaceutical company, a lot of money. And if the drug doesn't work very well, if it has serious side effects, this can have devastating effects on people. Theories of war, that's something I write about a lot. There's this very popular idea promoted by some of the most famous scientists in the world, like Steven Pinker and Edward Wilson, that war is part of human nature, that it's in our genes somehow. This is a very destructive idea. So I've criticized that a lot too. So some of the criticism I engage in.
I'd be interested in, like, later discombobulating what your views on this innate desire for war or innate desire for violence, and why you think that's not really part of human nature. But yeah, I mean,
Sure,
let's do that later. Oh, you've got a book on that, The End of War.
I've written 2 end of books.
Yes, that's right. The End of Science. Do you want to hold up your End of Science book as well? Because we should really discuss that.
Sure. Yeah, sort of my critical attitude towards science peaked in the mid 90s when I began to, well, first of all, I became really excited by this idea that was emerging in physics, that there might be a final theory out there, a unified theory, sometimes called a theory of everything, that would basically wrap up this ancient attempt to understand reality, the basic forces ruling reality. Stephen Hawking, Steven Weinberg, really major figures in physics were saying this. I took them seriously. And I thought through the implications of that. And this is in the early 90s. And I interviewed a lot of physicists and asked them about, the prospect of wrapping physics up. Because the major problems were all solved. We'd have a theory that would tell us how the universe was created in the first place, why the universe has this particular form, why is there something rather than nothing, basically. And I became so excited by that idea that I started looking for parallels in other fields, biology and neuroscience, and I found them. There was this amazing confidence running through science in the late 80s and early 90s that all the major problems could be solved. And I decided to write a book about that. And actually, in the course of writing the book, I decided that it's ridiculous. We're never going to get to the end of knowledge. We're never going to really explain the universe. We're never going to solve all the really deep mysteries, like where did the universe come from? How did consciousness emerge out of matter? Even how life emerged out of inanimate matter, and that science might be a victim of its own success. So it's not a postmodern argument. Some people have thought that I was saying that science really never gets anywhere. It's all constructed. No, my argument is basically that science has discovered what it can discover, and that it's reached an era of diminishing returns.
Yeah.
And some of the really big, outstanding questions are just going to be too difficult to solve.
Okay, yes. So this is a problem of whether it's actually possible in theory using empiricism to find out within a fair enough degree of likelihood how we arose from, how we sort of abiogenesis, how life arose on Earth, I guess maybe elsewhere in the universe as well, and how consciousness arose. I mean, we haven't really formally described consciousness with a high degree of agreement in the sciences anyway. But yeah, you don't think that it's possible for us to do that?
You know, I think consciousness, I've continued writing about I've actually been writing about it for decades and thinking about it since I was a little kid. Like, what the hell? You know, what am I? What does it mean to be this conscious thing looking out at the world? It's one of the oldest philosophical problems, and it's right at the center of science and philosophy today. I really don't think that this is the mind-body problem. The more I've thought about it, the more I think it's an unsolvable problem for reasons we can go into. Origin of life is a little trickier. I do think that we could have a pretty good understanding of the origin of life if we find life elsewhere. The problem with understanding the origin of life, the main question we want to answer right now is the degree to which life is a kind of inevitable outcome of the laws of physics and chemistry that are true throughout the universe, or whether it's this once in eternity, once in infinity fluke that maybe just happened here on Earth, and just this extraordinary stroke of luck. What I find fascinating about the origin of life, and I wrote a lot about it in The End of Science, is that you've got brilliant, really well-informed scientists who come to completely opposite conclusions on this question of whether life was highly probable or almost miraculous because it was so improbable. I think it's significant that there's less confidence that the origin of life can be solved now than there was 70 years ago. So it was in the 1950s that you first had this experiment of mixing some chemicals, creating some kind of reasonable facsimile of the primordial soup, and you got amino acids out of it. This is the Urey-Miller experiment. And people just thought, wow, okay, we're gonna explain the origin of life really quickly. And it just hasn't worked out that way. The origin of life now is more mysterious than ever. And we haven't discovered life elsewhere. No. So I think it's possible, you know, we discover life on a moon around Jupiter, or fossilized microbes on Mars, and that could break everything wide open. But right now, it's the prospects for solving the origin of life look pretty bleak.
It does. I mean, like, I guess if we do find like life under the ice on Europa, like, or we find a fossilized life form on Mars, or fossilized microbes, interestingly, there's methane rising from some of the valleys on Mars, which we don't have a proper settled on explanation for that. There's other explanations, but one of them is life. If we do find something, we still may find that they are sort of related to us, because there could have been some like drift between matter from Mars to our planet or vice versa. Maybe our form of life, maybe the origins of our tree, phylogenetic tree, began on Mars. Maybe, right?
Right.
Mm.
This right after the End of Science was published, there is a paper that claimed that evidence of fossilized microbes had been discovered in the Antarctic, and that was a chunk that had been blown off Mars and had ended up falling onto the Antarctic ice, and all these people were calling me up and saying, "Hey, man, Mr. End of Science, what do you say about this?" And I said it would be great if it were true. It was debunked fairly quickly. I certainly hope to see life discovered elsewhere. That would be one of the great discoveries of all time, maybe the greatest discovery of all time, especially if it is, if it's DNA based, that would be incredible. If it's not, that would be even more incredible if it was some entirely different genetic system. I hope to see that happen. The best thing, of course, would be if aliens land and we can communicate, like the sci-fi version of the discovery of life elsewhere. That would be really.
Absolutely. But, there's been a lot of claims that it has happened without much proper evidence. But it's interesting, like if you have a look at the night sky, there doesn't seem to be any easily detectable evidence of at least intelligent expansionist civilizations out there. So we're talking about the Fermi paradox here and the Drake equation. Imagine, so there's just so many possible planets out there in our galaxy alone, let alone all the other galaxies in our cluster, let alone all the other galaxies in other superclusters. There's ridiculous amounts. It's crazy that we can't see any real strong evidence for intelligent life. One of them could be that it's very rare. You've heard of Robin Hanson, the economist. He came up with the idea of the Great Filter. Maybe intelligent civilizations destroy themselves before they ever get to the expansionist stage. Or maybe there's some other strong attractor there that, intelligent civilizations suddenly discover a way to tunnel to a new universe or create their own, or some sort of VR, and they find that they could do everything they ever wanted to inside another universe or a virtual reality that they wouldn't be able to find elsewhere in the universe. But all of these require just one explanation. But what if there were many civilizations out there? Why would they all take this route of either tunneling to another universe or going isolationist and getting absorbed in their virtual reality? Why would they all behave in the same way? It's still striking. The best explanation is there's just not many that rise to prominence and become a galactic civilization.
What I find fascinating about this is the different directions that brilliant, well-informed people can go. So Richard Dawkins is, he sees this kind of inevitability behind the growing complexity of life, and he has, he's so adamant that life doesn't have a divine creation, that it's all natural selection is all you need to explain it. Not just life itself, but even this extraordinarily complex life that we embody. But what I like to point out is that life started on Earth like 3.5 billion years ago, last time I checked. And for about 2.5 billion years, the first 2.5 billion years, it just remained as single-celled organisms. And it was only through some kind of process that nobody really understands, that suddenly multi-celled organisms emerged. And then, much more recently that you got mammals and Homo sapiens, compared to the vast stretch of geologic time, it's just happened in like a split second ago. And so this idea of there being an inevitability to our existence, to me, is absurd. It's kind of, I think non-religious people make these sorts of arguments as a substitute for religion. They don't like the feeling of us being kind of here through just an unbelievable sequence of coincidences. But that's how I look at it. I don't believe in God.
So what is it about like humans that they want an explanation and they try and fill in the gaps, even though there's not as much? I mean, we're not satisfied to just settle with, I don't know, or it's a mystery. We need something to fill these gaps, some explanation that feels good when there's not enough. Well, I mean, often when there is evidence, we ignore it and just fill it in with what we want anyway. But what is this human, how would you explain this human nature to do this?
I've written about this a lot lately. I think that you can see religion and science and philosophy and all our modes of knowledge as attempts to answer this kind of what the fuck feeling we have when we examine ourselves and look around at ourselves like, how did this happen? I'm an old acid head, and to me, the takeaway of a psychedelic experience is to have that feeling of what the fuck just amplified enormously. So you see yourself as infinitely improbable, and that's a very uncomfortable feeling, because to the extent that we're improbable, that suggests that we could vanish at any time. Our position, our existence is very fragile and tenuous. And so we grasp at straws, and we imagine that, we're the product of this divine, omniscient, all-powerful creature, or that we're the product of natural selection, which is just creating greater complexity through the universe. And we want certainty. We want absolute certainty. You see this both in religion. Everybody wants to think that their religion is the best. You also see it in science. You want to believe that not just that you have found a theory of nature, like quantum mechanics or relativity or whatever, but that it is the true, correct way to look at nature. And the thing about certainty, I totally understand it, but it gets humans into trouble. To the degree to which we believe our own ideologies or theories or religions, and we're absolutely sure that they're true, we can really become zealots. We become fanatics, and we start doing bad things to each other. And this isn't just a religious phenomenon, as some of the atheists would like to tell you. It also happens in the realm of science. You see it in social Darwinism and eugenics and these other pseudoscientific theories that tell us how we are supposed to understand ourselves and live our lives. So the older I've gotten, the more I've promoted uncertainty and doubt as a fundamental way to look at the universe, both because I think it's a healthier attitude, and because I think it's the right way to look at the world. Our knowledge is pathetically inadequate at actually explaining the mystery of the world.
Indeed. In fact, I've just started a free online course. I mean, you can pay for a certificate if you want it, but Coursera has a course on epistemic humility. It's actually entitled Intellectual Humility. It is turning out to be quite good. It is something I think everybody should be aware of, that is to doubt their own surety of things, for sure.
Can you tell me, who are your readings? Are there any people that exemplify?
Yeah. I think it seems to be based in a virtue epistemology framework, which I'm not that versed with. But people from Edinburgh University in Scotland, I believe, are involved.
Hmm.
Duncan Pritchard, ever heard of him?
I
Yeah,
haven't.
yeah.
These are still living philosophers. These aren't
Oh yeah,
old
yeah,
dead
yeah.
people.
They're living philosophers. That's right. Yeah, they're not. Well, at least last I checked. Yeah.
Right.
You covered a lot of conferences in the past. One of them was like on AI.
Yeah, I think it was 2017. It was a few years ago at
Oh,
NYU, which is right across the Hudson River from me. And it was a bunch of stars
hmm.
of AI.
I remember that actually. I didn't go, but I remember it being on.
Yeah, some of the people who've gotten famous for talking about, um, the singularity and these other dramatic things that might happen as a result of AI. Nick Bostrom was there, who's talked about super intelligent AI maybe doing bad things to us. Eliezer Yudkowsky, who's this kind of, I'm not sure how to describe him, but he's sort of a guru figure in AI, very eccentric guy. Steve Wolfram um, of Wolfram Math or Mathematica, this brilliant physicist who then veered into the software world. A bunch of philosophers. Dave Chalmers was one of the organizers of the
Yeah.
conference. Chalmers, the hard problem of consciousness guy. And what I found funny about it was that there was just kind of this assumption that AI was going to happen. We're going to, in other words, the science fiction version of AI, we're going to have sentient machines. And then people were playing with the consequences out of that. The title, The Ethics of AI, the way people interpreted it was first thinking about whether machines could have some kind of ethical system built into them. And then also, how should we behave toward machines? What should our ethical attitude toward our own creations be? And this led to people talking about whether there should be basic rights granted to sex bots, for example. That was definitely one of the most entertaining talks. A lot of the lectures were presented in this sort of jokey way. It wasn't clear to me how seriously they wanted to be taken. Steve Wolfram was pretty serious. He basically was. I think his idea was that Wolfram Alpha would take over the world. You'd have his versions of software,
I'm not surprised.
software that would accomplish all our goals for us. There was this wonderful moment at the end of toward the end of the conference. Thomas Nagel, one of the great living
What's it
philosophers.
like to be a bat?
Yes.
Or what's it like to be a cat? Heard you right.
Yes. And he was reacting to all these schemes for instilling ethics in machines to make sure that they'd be nice to us. They'd solve the problems that Bostrom and others were talking about. And Nagel said, philosophers have been trying to come up with a system of ethics for thousands of years, and we've failed. Philosophers don't even agree on what ethics is. So how can we possibly put it into machines? So that was just sort of a moment I loved, because it was kind of like deflating this whole enterprise. So I found the conference to be really interesting. And this happens to me a lot as a journalist, sort of on a sociological level, watching all these smart people who were overly enamored of their own ideas sort of walk through the consequences when they were ignoring some really obvious problems with what they were saying, such as, we can't automate ethics if we don't even know what ethics is. We can't even agree on it. Another problem I had was that there was nothing about, the sort of real world AI being used by powerful corporations and governments to watch people, carry out surveillance, and to control people. And AI being used in ways that would exacerbate inequality in the United States, eliminating a lot of jobs. Not in some ridiculous science fiction way, but in a way that we're already seeing the consequences of now. So it was, you know, in a way, it sort of embodied some of the problems I have with philosophy. I love philosophy. I consider myself an amateur philosopher in my own journalism, but too often it's really disconnected with what's actually happening in the world and what's really important.
Mm. Yeah, interestingly, I do get, and I do feel some of the points you're talking about. When you mentioned automating ethics, we don't have an agreed on ethics. It's really hard to automate. I mean, Asimov sort of used this as a foil for a lot of his writings too, really. How can we automate a bunch of rules, right? We know there's so many ways that they can be sort of misinterpreted, broken, or subverted. How does it happen? I mean, like, can we actually automate ethics? I mean, a utilitarian, which I guess I lean towards, with some qualifications there, would say that, well, you just got to figure out what the best utility is, and then, you know, like do a bunch of computation. Forget about rules, forget about virtue, just, you know, try and like calculate what the outcomes would be. And that's very difficult because, I mean, calculating outcomes in the real world can be extremely computationally expensive. So yeah. Look, I don't assume that it's been solved. Most of the AI guys who are interested in AI ethics don't treat it like a solved problem, but are still willing to say, hey, here's some ideas. Let's see if we can just run with that. And I guess how do you start with this sort of problem? And how do you know you've finished? I guess is a really difficult answer to sort of give. Yeah.
If I could just add one point, this is something that I thought about when I was writing The End of Science, because the term singularity wasn't in play when I was writing The End of Science. So, you know, I was really writing it in like 1993, 1994. Maybe it had already been coined there then.
Well, yeah, Werner Vinge, I think, coined it in a 1993 essay that he did for a NASA conference, and he also mentioned the term in an Omni magazine in the 80s. But he in concept, he covered these concepts these ideas in novellas and books way before that, without like formally defining it. Yeah.
So the people I was talking, well, the main person I was talking to was Freeman Dyson, who in a way you can see is kind of the godfather of the singularity. Yeah, he died recently. He's one of the most brilliant, imaginative scientists of the 20th century.
Right.
Amazing. Yeah. And he, back in the at least in the 70s, was already speculating about the long-term evolution of intelligence in the future. I talked to a bunch of other people who I interviewed Marvin Minsky, the AI pioneer, and Ed Fredkin, and a lot of these sort of AI visionaries. And what was interesting was that there seemed to be this assumption that AI would be competitive, that when machines become super intelligent and autonomous, capable of having their own values, their own goals apart from us, that they would be competing with each other. And, I'm this old hippie pacifist, so that sort of bothered me. I thought, why would super intelligent entities do the same stupid shit that we've been doing forever? Could they evolve past mindless competition that even becomes violent? I mean, this is what all science fictions assume, right? But I thought maybe if, what I like about AI, even though I don't take it that seriously as something that's actually going to happen. In other words, sentient, autonomous AI, but I love it as a kind of thought experiment for how we might evolve in the future. I said the term I coined in The End of Science for it was scientific theology. You're sort of thinking about the long-term purpose of intelligence in the universe. And I like to think that if you have if you have these creatures, these machines, things, whatever, that have an IQ of, I don't know, 10,000, that they would get along with each other. They would have better things to do with their time than beating the hell out of each other and, having turf wars and this sort of thing. And that's
Well,
kind of that's sort of an
yeah.
ethical judgment, of course.
If AI did get to a sort of a stage where it'd be able to think about these sorts of things, it's very difficult to assume that it would take a human trajectory to get there, and that would like necessarily embody what we humans would believe as being like the right thing to do. Steve Omohundro, for instance, you might have met him. He wrote Basic AI Drives, an early paper, and he thinks that like any agent in an environment that needs to optimize for something would need resources, and that would be like resources to compute on, and also resources, power, and also a need to update its own code. So the turf wars would maybe be a lot about resource utilization, getting a lot of resources that you can use. But game theoretically, some argue that stopping other competitive AIs from having access to resources may be a strategy to stop them from realizing your goals. So if you cut off the resources of a competing AI, then you can increase the likelihood of achieving your goals.
The implicit question here, and again, this is why I love AI, is if you're talking about battling for resources and everything, that presumably is not an end in itself. It's a means to an end. You don't, unless you're the kind of creature that loves war. And there are, there's certainly humans like that. Not very many, fortunately, or we would have been destroyed a long time ago. But what is the end? But let's assume super intelligent machines are created. What would they do? What would they think about? What would be their goals? I actually asked Freeman Dyson this, because he had this vision of our descendants being these super intelligent gas clouds that are drifting through space, trying to ward off heat death. And he thought mainly what they would be thinking about is trying to stay alive as the heat dissipates in the universe. And I said, okay, that's fine, but if they just take care of that, what do they do for fun? What does a super intelligent gas cloud do for fun? What's meaningful to it? And what was weird is that it's like that thought hadn't occurred to Dyson before. And he sort of thought about it for a while. And then he said, I think maybe they would solve math puzzles. I asked, there's this other guy I interviewed for the End of Science, Frank Tipler, this really wacky physicist.
Yep. The Omega point, yeah.
And, so he had this vision of the whole universe being turned into a giant cosmic computer. And he thought that the universe would be closed and it would compress to a point at which the computing power of the universe would spike to infinity. It was capable of thinking every possible thought, imagining every possible world. And what he thought, this is basically a godlike entity you're imagining. And Tipler's idea of what it would think about was that it would reimagine our world, except much, much better. So we would both be super handsome, and we would also be able to have sex with anybody we wanted, with not only the most beautiful woman who had ever lived, but the most beautiful woman who you could imagine. That was Tipler's vision. To me, the only meaningful pursuit for a super intelligent entity would be trying to understand where it came from, would be trying to understand the world. It's the same thing that we're doing right now. And my intuition, and this is actually fed by this monster drug trip that I had, my intuition is that it won't know the answer, that the more intelligent we become, that we will become more baffled by our own existence. We'll move away toward any certainty that we know what's going on, that we really understand the universe and why there's something rather than nothing. But I still have this, in spite of what I just said, don't be certain about anything. I guess I do have this certainty that the highest goal of a sentient, an intelligent being should be to understand how it exists at all.
So there has been some interesting developments in AI. I wouldn't call them super intelligent in the way that people describe Nick Bostrom's views of superintelligence. It's not super intelligent in every spectrum, but it's certainly like more capable of certain things across different spectrums, like the spectrum of cat image recognition. Like it can do that very fast and much faster than a human. It can. We have GTP3. That's an interesting text generation tool. It doesn't understand what it's doing, but it's able to generate some pretty interesting text at this point. And we have AI that can sort of perform much better in Go competitions and fold proteins or predict protein folding solutions pretty well. But yeah, we're not there at general intelligence yet. But I mean, this is different from Marvin Minsky's view on AI. There was a guy called, do you remember the name Oliver Selfridge, who was around the early AI pioneer? He was more of a connectionist kind of guy who was talking about neural nets and something akin to what like deep learning, I guess. Do you think part of the reason there was an AI winter that because we were just trying to work it all out symbolically instead of like this connectionist sub-symbolic sort of approach to AI?
There's so many things that could be said about AI, just in terms of its goals. What were the original pioneers thinking of? Certainly one of their goals. I mean, and as I said, I interviewed, I spent a whole afternoon with Minsky. I interviewed John McCarthy over the phone. I've talked to a lot of the early AI people. Well, he was still alive in the 1990s when I was starting.
He coined the term artificial intelligence.
Yeah, and maybe that might be, if a different term had been used,
exactly.
maybe we wouldn't have these endless debates over, whether AI has been hyped. But certainly one of the original goals was to understand ourselves, understand, the assumption was that we're machines and we think, and we need to reverse engineer our own thinking machines to understand ourselves. And one way to do that is to replicate thinking in a machine. Now, the assumption is that thinking is this information processing that's going on in the brain, and it can be extracted from the substrate of flesh, in the brain, and put in other substances like silicon. And you have, instead of neurons, you have circuits and switches and things like that. And that's a reasonable assumption, but it might be wrong. Mm-hmm. It might be that the substrate of our own thinking is necessary for the kind of thinking that we do. And that when you have artificial machines, they're not even in the same ballpark as what we're doing.
Yeah.
It's a possibility that a lot of AI people don't seem willing to entertain, but when we remain so far away from the possibility, from the goal of an actual sentient, autonomous machine, however that might be realized, I think you have to consider that AI, that some of these fundamental assumptions of AI might be wrong. Now, you can look at AI just as a technology program, and I think that's how most practicing AI researchers look at it now. You just want to do certain things with machines. You want to replicate certain tasks and do them even better than humans. In that case, it would be trying to mimic what humans do, it doesn't make any sense. It's like trying to imitate a sparrow when you're building a plane. You know, we can find technologies that fly that are much better for the jobs that we want to do than
But we don't call our flying machines artificial birds.
right.
I think
Yes.
yeah. Like if we did call them artificial birds, I'm sure somebody would be saying, "Hey, we haven't achieved flight yet because the planes don't flap their wings." Right?
Right. But
What if we had have called the AI field, you know, I guess computational cognition or computational symbol processing, something rather more mundane and boring? Perhaps, you know, we would be at a different place. We'd be discussing the whole thing. And I mean, I get the impression that people are sort of intimidated by artificial intelligence, and the term is intimidating because it sort of represents a value or a virtue that we hold very dear in us, our intelligence. And if there's some sort of like artifice, some sort of machine that's sort of encroaching on this sort of island of human uniqueness, it's a little bit difficult to swallow.
You know, I think there's some truth to that. I just get irritated when, you know, whenever I criticize AI, I always get these true believers. And I do think that there's kind of a cult of AI, and certainly a cult of the singularity, which is not rational, really. But people say, oh, you're just, you know, you're just defending, you're a humanist or whatever the equivalent of a speciesist, or,
Yeah, I
you
know
know,
what you mean. Yeah.
discriminating against machines, and you're clinging to your own
I'm a post-humanist.
identity because you're threatened by AI. I can assure you, I'm not threatened by AI. I would actually, I think it would be in the same way that I want to see aliens while I'm still alive. I'd love to see sentient machines. I just don't see anything, even in you know, on the horizon that looks like a truly sentient machine. No, it's just
Yeah, I get it. So if we don't achieve sentient machines, we can still achieve capable machines. I think this is the point, is that we don't need to have an AI that has raw feels or has consciousness as we sort of ascribe that humans do, even though we haven't really figured out what the actual basis for that is. We feel it. We have some science telling us, well, here's our pain receptors, here's the parts of our brain which experience pleasure, here's the parts of our brain which experience pain. And this is what we believe gives rise to this sort of phenomenal experience of pain and pleasure, these raw feels. So, okay, so let's just say we don't achieve that with AI. What's stopping AI from becoming extremely capable without those attributes?
Oh, that's already happening. I mean, Jesus, I'm blown away. Look at us. I mean, not AI, but digital technologies. What I've seen in my lifetime, my first job, I told you, I worked at this engineering magazine. I wrote my stories on a typewriter. I have students now who've never seen a typewriter. They probably have no idea how it works. You know, the internet. I've seen the birth of the internet. It's incredible, some of the things that have been done. You know, Google search, which certainly has a lot of artificial intelligence built into it. It's amazing. It's just that this, you know, the science fiction early pioneer idea of sentient machines, HAL and all that. I feel like we're, you know, if we're trying to get to the moon, we've done the equivalent of climbing a tree or sort of jumping up in the air.
Yeah, we're a little bit closer.
One other issue though, and this comes from studying the mind-body problem and attempts to understand consciousness, and that field is like in total disarray right now, with all kinds of wild theories being entertained. You know, there's this old debate about whether a machine can ever be conscious, and you've got the Turing test and things like that, but that's kind of a behavioral test. We don't even know consciousness. Consciousness is something that can't be measured objectively in the way that we can measure temperature or pressure or things like that. And this is one of the problems with theorizing about consciousness. Christoph Koch, this great
I've
neuroscientist.
interviewed him, yeah. He's right into him and like a number of others, integrated information theory, yeah. So he's got this high sort of sigma thing, yeah.
Well, and
he's I love the guy.
He's one of the reasons why I think that mind-body science has gone off the deep end. The fact that he's entertaining an idea like panpsychism and integrated information theory tells me that something's really gone wrong. But he has this, but he's brilliant, and I love the guy. But he has this idea of a consciousness meter. Did he talk to you about that? So it would be a device.
We intended to talk about that. We actually spoke more about ethics, and like he had this wonderful dog, Nosy, who died, and his experience with his dog dying led him to vegetarianism, and yeah, so it was such a.
He's the kind of guy. He can talk about anything, and it will be interesting and deeply informed. But he has this idea of the consciousness meter, which, as you know, is a device that you can point it at something, and it will, you'll have some kind of dial. It will register that there's consciousness in that thing.
Like something similar to a thermometer.
Yeah. And you can point it at humans. So maybe somebody appears to be in a coma. You point it at them. No, you see that they're actually conscious. You point it at a dog or a catfish or a jellyfish. You can determine whether they're conscious. You can point it at your smartphone and find out if it's conscious. And you need this to verify the claims of theories like integrated information theory, which claims that consciousness pervades all of matter. But I don't.
I don't think integrated information theory is the same as panpsychism. But yeah, go on.
In its early versions, it definitely was. I mean,
maybe.
Koch, he just flatly said that. I've quoted him saying it. He might have, I think in different contexts, he will adjust the theory because panpsychism sounds too crazy. But he definitely has said that an implication of this theory is panpsychism, that if you have a single proton with 3 quarks transmitting information to each other, there can be a little sliver of consciousness in that. But the point I'm trying to make is that I don't think a consciousness meter is possible. I think you have to have it's sort of this, it's a begging the question kind of problem. You have to have a theory of consciousness to create a consciousness meter, but you have to have a theory of consciousness to create a consciousness meter, but you can't confirm your theory of consciousness unless you have a consciousness meter.
Chicken and egg problem.
I'm hoping that I did that correctly. So I think it might be possible to have them just for humans, but not for consciousness in general. And that's the mystery is, we know that we're conscious, but we can't be sure if anything else is conscious. And I can't even be sure that you're conscious. And so, it's the solipsism problem. How do you get around that scientifically? And as of right now, nobody has an answer.
Have you, I don't know if it's going to be easy. I think we've only been doing science for a couple of 100 years, and that's not that much. We had protoscience before then, but if we do survive, if we don't go extinct, maybe we can have a lot more time to sort of think about things and sort of, yeah. I mean, we're just beginning, aren't we? I mean, it's the amount of time we've had to evolve compared to the amount of time we've had civilization, compared to the amount of time we've had the scientific method, is, quite large. Now, so we haven't figured out all these problems. We haven't agreed on settlements to these issues yet. Maybe it's true what you're saying that we never will, but I don't know. That's the only answer I can give.
I try not to be too adamant. I mean, I'm a teacher. I teach at a university, and most of my students aspire to be scientists or engineers, and I don't, I give them a big dose of my negativity and pessimism about science, but I try to be sort of ironic and good natured about it. So yeah, maybe a consciousness meter is right around the corner. Maybe origin of life. And,
Yeah. We
it's
don't
wonderful.
know. I mean, in the same way as like the scientific theories we have for things that are a lot more easier to measure, we don't actually have like a, you know, we ascribe truth to these things. Like we think gravity is true. We think, you know, our theory of light is true, right? But we only have like high degrees, very, very high degrees of confidence in what we consider our physical laws. But really, there's the measurement problem that comes into play, and the fact that, you know, we get all these things from our senses. But I mean, there seems to be just so much regularity in what our senses provide us that it's difficult to be convinced that we're solipsists, that the, you know, the universe is really just a phenomenal thing that's happening all inside like my own head, and I don't know for sure that you exist, but there seems to be so much regularity out there which suggests that you do exist, or that other people in my life exist, and there's a world outside of my own mind, that I just take it for granted. It's a leap of faith. I know that leap exists, but I don't. It doesn't worry me.
Me too. I bring up solipsism for two reasons. One is because I think it is a serious problem for people who are trying to understand consciousness and have some kind of consciousness meter. I also bring it up, and I wrote a column about solipsism recently because it's kind of an extreme sort of reductio ad absurdum of the basic isolation that every human feels, that we know each other only kind of inferentially. And, you know, we send each other these signals and we're trying to figure out what's going on in each other's heads, but we never really can be sure. And, you know,
our
we have
mirror
all,
neurons spike.
yeah,
We feel. Do we really have mirror neurons, or is that just part of our solipsist imagination going wild? There's so many good reasons not to believe in solipsism. It's an interesting philosophical idea. Have you ever heard of the Horgan twins?
the Horgan twins. No.
Yeah, the Siamese twins conjoined at the head with some form of bridging going on. Is it the thalamus?
Wow.
Yeah, so I mean, it's definitely worth looking at that. But imagine it being one of those girls where they have an experience of each other's perceptions. So one of them is looking this way at a block in the floor, and the other one can reach over and pick it up. One of them puts like a chip of tomato sauce in their mouth and enjoys it. The other one doesn't like tomato sauce, so they'll go, ugh, what's going on, right? So in a sense, they have like a very strange and different view on the world than we do, I imagine.
Well, you know, there are also split brain.
Oh yeah.
That have this same phenomenon of dueling consciousnesses. And sometimes, you know, there are videos that you can see of these people where, you know, one hand is reaching out to grab something and the other hand is slapping that hand because it doesn't want the other hand to do that thing.
Yeah.
You know, just going back, you mentioned the measurement problem. I just wanted to mention that for the last 6 months, this is kind of a COVID project. I've been trying to learn quantum mechanics.
Oh, wow.
And I mean, you know, I've written about it for decades, but I don't know what the hell I'm talking about, as the physicists will eagerly confirm. I wanted to learn the mathematics. And so I just finished a course at my university on quantum mechanics, and I've been reading, you know, I went back and relearned calculus. I'm trying to learn linear algebra and all this stuff. And so far, my takeaway is that quantum mechanics, you know, the physicists go on and on about the beauty of the equations and all this, and you know, they have this very Platonic view of the world. My view of the mathematics of quantum mechanics is that it's really kludgy and ugly. And, you have the Schrodinger equation, but the Schrodinger equation doesn't even give you precise solutions of a single helium atom. They can solve a hydrogen atom, but anything beyond that, you have to use approximations and have patches and all this kind of stuff. And so I used to be, I've really been questioning my own end of science thesis. I used to think that because physicists assured me the quantum mechanics was kind of conceptually the end of the line for physics. Now I feel like the whole thing is so jury-rigged that it could really collapse, and that there could be some deeper, superior theory beyond it, and that some physicists might be trapped by their own certainty that quantum mechanics is a kind of dead end. And it has been extraordinarily effective. But if you imagine your God looking at all the possible mathematical models of physical reality, you might realize that we went down this one road when there are all these other possibilities over here, which would have led to maybe a more elegant conception of physical reality, and maybe even solve the mind-body problem.
Yeah. Whether we can actually discover that theory, given this dead end you mentioned, is a difficult thing. Maybe we do need some sort of alien-like machine cognition to, just look at things and see them in an unbiased way, or a way which is biased in a different way than human intelligence is biased.
The New York Times, one of my favorite writers, a guy named Dennis Overby, he just had an article maybe 2 weeks ago on how machines might discover the unified theory, the theory of everything, which is actually something that Stephen Hawking was saying back in the 1980s.
Interestingly, AlphaGo, like the protein folding problem, has been solved. And no, that's not about us like a bunch of alpha males drinking protein shakes and folding their arms and lifting up weights. It's actually an interesting scientific problem that's been very difficult to solve over a long period of time. AlphaFold has just become a very good predictor of solutions to protein folding.
I've read some stuff about it. I mean, there have been, I've seen, I don't know, I guess probably thousands of stories like this since I started writing about technology and science in the early 80s. I interviewed the IBM team that built Deep Blue, which won the World Chess Championship back in the 90s. So I realized that machines are doing some unbelievable things, but they're tools at this point.
Still,
and
very capable tools. And I mean,
yes, extraordinarily capable. I mean, in terms of getting stuff done, you've got computers being used in mathematics going back to the 1970s, the four-color theorem. Computers are essential to some mathematical proofs. One of the interesting questions that arises, and this came up in the story about AI and a unified theory of physics, is that the machine might produce an answer, but humans can't understand it. It's too complex. It's kind of black box computation.
Yeah, it sort of reminds me of the Hitchhiker's Guide to Galaxy, deep mind that gives us the answer of 42, but we really don't understand what the question would be. But I mean, that is a problem. Like if we have like extraordinarily powerful, opaque AIs that don't understand themselves, and we can't understand how they get to certain solutions, and that becomes a big problem. How do we verify? How do we replicate this problem? And so I think you brought up the idea that like a lot of a lot of the AI in the academic field of AI, there's not much replication going on. Is that correct?
Well, I hadn't been aware that there are some AI researchers that are complaining about this. So there was a big, I think Google published something on some kind of medical AI program. They're making some claims. And then another group of AI researchers said, this kind of claim is it's useless because they're not sharing their code. So there's no way we can replicate it. And it turned out that this is true of a lot of papers. So some of these groups, and I guess this tends to be more of a problem with corporate AI research, that it's proprietary. They don't want to share the code, but it just means that, it's not science. It's not the kind of transparency that we want of scientific advances. So I thought I hadn't heard that before. That's why I put it in this recent column that I wrote.
But what can we do about that? Sort of the replication crisis is a big problem in science itself, like, just humans doing science. It's not sexy to be one of the replicators. You're just like taking somebody else's idea and just checking it. It's a whole lot more, I guess, sexy to be the vanguard who's out there trying to discover stuff and create new and exciting new ways of looking at the world. And the people performing the replication tests don't get the sort of credibility that maybe they should. And maybe they don't get paid enough as well. There's not enough resources poured into solving the replication crisis. But
there are groups that are trying to address that problem and compensate for doing replication. One of a related problem to
maybe AI might be able to help with that.
Seriously, it probably could. A problem related to the replication crisis that you also see in AI, I just tweeted a story from Wired about this, is that some of the big corporations, Google and Facebook, that have AI programs also it's tied pretty closely to their own marketing. And so they see some of these announcements about AI as being good for the company's reputation. And according to this Wired article, some of the companies have tried to squelch research that indicates that the AI is flawed or that it might be racist and exhibiting bias and things like that. And so this is another problem that's endemic to science. When there are financial stakes there, then that sometimes it corrupts the science inevitably.
Yeah. This is not a unique problem. It's also, it happens in not just big companies, but a lot of people bench or sort of put in the bottom drawer results that don't confirm their hypothesis. Right?
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, this is...
and science journalists who have a big idea like the end of science sometimes cling to it tenaciously, but not entirely rationally. There it is again. All right, it's a this book is coming out like right now. I mean, I'm not sure when this is going to air, but it's December, and my book will be on Amazon on December 15th. And it's a very lightly fictionalized stream of consciousness account of a day in my life. Yeah. I wrote it as a kind of exercise of just trying to understand my own thought process. I'm a big fan of Ulysses, the Stream of Consciousness book by James Joyce, and I probably shouldn't mention this, but that was one of the inspirations for this book. I've become obsessed with trying to sort of stop my own thoughts and look at them, and I'm also obsessed with how irrational I am. I think I'm pretty rational, but my rationality is all intertwined with all these other crazy thoughts, fear of death, thinking about sex and love and things like that, about loneliness and the solipsism problem. And so I'm basically trying to lay it all out in this book.
Actually, I've really enjoyed reading it so far. It's been amazing. I think I've only got a couple of chapters left to read, so I'd recommend definitely anybody who's wanting something quite easy to follow. It's it'd be excellent for getting on a plane and reading. I reckon be able to finish it in one sitting. I think if you're on a plane or something like that.
And it's even illustrated. I have a Russian psychedelic artist friend,
nice.
And he created art for different chapters. These are all images that are based on things that I think about in that particular chapter.
Mm-hmm. Oh, well, yeah, it's been wonderful speaking to you. It's so, yeah, I hope to do it again sometime. But have you got any other projects that are coming up soon? Any other books on the horizon?
Quantum mechanics.
Yeah.
I'm going to write. I'm going to I'm going to blow wide open the cult of quantum mechanics.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, it's been wonderful speaking to you. And yeah, we'll touch base another time. And
Okay,
thanks for all the listeners. And yeah, if you like this podcast, please subscribe.